focusing on theatrical escaping in the way that we have just done makes it very easy to see the enormous difference between negative and positive therapies. So we could imagine that on the one side we have the positive therapies, and on the other side we have negative therapy. And on the positive side, we could fill many books with all the different approaches, all the different methods. Literally dozens and dozens and hundreds of books. You could have a great pile of books there. And that's kind of confusing in itself. And even when you get into the nitty-gritty, there's still a lot to wrap your head around in any one particular type of positive therapy. Now, this isn't to write off positive therapies entirely. To a certain extent, fixing is a part of our lives, and fixing is an important thing to know how to do. But it's also important to know when fixing has now turned pathological and it isn't the right thing to do. So just to imagine that we live in a universe where there's nothing but fixing, and if we can't fix them, we just have to either make a super attempt to fix or despair. It's not a great situation to be in without this ability to see when fixing's no longer appropriate. We're in a real jam. So the positive therapies are innumerable, and negative therapy is only the one. And the difference is that in all positive therapies, we're striving to change our situation, to make our situation better, more livable, more practicable. We're striving to change things. And what that comes down to in psychological terms is always trying to suffer less, because that's what we're interested about. Well, that's what we're interested in. That's always what we're interested in, suffering less. That's really, really interesting. My ears will prick up immediately as soon as I hear that. That's the core of everything. So the negative approach goes against this, and because of that it's not particularly interesting for most of us, most of the time. Though there comes a time when it is interesting, when we realise that there's a whole lot of freedom this way, that there isn't the other way. And so the simplicity of the negative approach is that it simply involves not trying to escape the whole time, not putting all our money on theatrical escaping. So it's a not doing. If we can not opt out the whole time, then that's it. That's all there is to it. There is nothing more to it than not opting out. And yet it's subtler than it might sound, because I could very easily turn this into a strategy and turn not theatrically escaping into a strategy. So when I feel like pressing the exit button or the ejection button, I say to myself, no, I'm not going to do that. So my strategy is to say no to the impulse and not go through the rigmarole of trying to escape. But that's a strategy, and that's no good, because that's an escape as well. The only way it's going to work is if I don't go through the motions of theatrically escaping. Not because I say to myself, I mustn't do it. It's not a deliberate not doing, it's just a not doing. So it comes from a much deeper place than this store of ideas and strategies that I have in my head to apply to every everyday situation that comes my way. I can learn strategies fast enough, but I can't learn not doing fast, because it's coming from a whole different place. So the way to get to not doing, so that it really genuinely happens that I don't do, I haven't thought about it, I just don't do. Therefore, it's not simply that I've straining and struggling not to do what I normally do. It's through insight, as I have been saying in very many of these episodes, that when you see the full picture, it loses all its appeal. It is no longer appealing. There's nothing there to be excited about, because there's nothing there. We see the whole show and we realise that it's just a merry-go-round, that I get nowhere. So it's effort. It's always effort when you're involved in a rigmarole. And if you're involved in a rigmarole only to end up in exactly the same place that you started off from, then of course there's no appeal in that rigmarole. There is no appeal in rigmaroles. Rigmaroles are rigmaroles. It would be like filling in some extra large bureaucratic form for no reason at all, just because it's a hobby, something to do. On the whole, very few people are going to have that as a hobby. As a rule, there's always a carrot dangling somewhere. So when we see that there is no carrot, that the carrot is a mirage or hallucination, which we absolutely will see if we keep on paying attention, then we no longer jump at doing. So this isn't coming from a rational point of view where we say, I mustn't do the bad thing because the bad thing's bad, which is the only way rational approaches can work. It's either do the good thing or don't do the bad thing, or chase the advantageous outcome and flee the disadvantageous one. There's nothing else Thinking ever does apart from that. It can't ever think in any non-polar terms, in any terms that aren't either advantage versus disadvantage, good versus bad. But instead, what's operating, if we can say the word operating for this, it's just consciousness. We're just being conscious of the illusory nature of the carrot. And that's a peaceful thing. There's no fighting involved. I don't have to fight at all, because the carrot is an illusion. I don't have to have make any effort to insist that it's an illusion. I just let it be what it is, which is an illusion. So it's a very gentle, very delicate kind of a thing. Being conscious of something is always very, very gentle, very, very delicate. If it wasn't, then it wouldn't be seeing at all, but it would be the counterpart of seeing, which is stating. Now, it's good to remember as much as we can, or pay attention to the fact that we go through our lives stating things. Why do we state it? Why do we state anything? Because we have to state it for it to be true. We have to fight against the inverse proposition. I say God exists to fight against the heretical inverse proposition that God doesn't exist, which is a terrible heresy, therefore I have to fight against it. So it doesn't take too much to see that stating that God exists is the same heresy as denying God's existence. It's the very same thing, and it doesn't take too much to see that. As soon as we start going into it at all and making a song and dance about it, it's not gentle, it's not based on truth. It's based on what I would like to be true, which is a different matter entirely. So this part of working consciously, suffering consciously, is effortless. If I find myself straining, it's because I'm trying to make something true that isn't true. Because in the psychological realm, that's what straining always is. It's always making things be what they're not, or trying to. Because, of course, actually we can't do that. We can't make things be what they're not. And if we could see this, we would give up trying and we'd experience a whole load of freedom as a result, because there is no freedom in trying to make things be what they're not. There's no freedom there at all, because even if we can apparently make things seem to be what they're not, we keep having to bang on and bang on and bang on to keep that illusion going, to keep it inviolable. So from the beginning to the end, there's no freedom in that, and we're not really getting anywhere. The only way freedom could come into that would be if I got the courage to say, well, things aren't what I say they are. They just aren't. In which case, I let go of the struggling, I let go of the asserting, and there's my freedom again. So at that stage, I'm actually relating to reality, and in relating to reality, there is freedom. In relating to our own projections or mental constructs, and insisting that they're not projections or constructs, there is no freedom. And just to keep on, just to say it again, this is what we do all the time. All the time we are asserting, we are stating things. All the time we are going in the opposite direction from freedom. Our whole world is something that is being stated. So the whole world that we live in is devoid of freedom. So that part of working consciously or suffering consciously is effortless. But in another sense, there is effort, but it's not the straining type of effort where you grit your teeth and you look very, very serious and the veins are bulging out on your neck. So there's that type of effort. There's that type of straining, which is, as Alan Watts says somewhere, it's an awful lot like being constipated. So conscious suffering doesn't involve this type of constipated straining when we're trying to produce something. But there is an effortfulness, as Scott Peck says, in relating to reality rather than our convenient ideas about what reality is or should be. There's an ongoing challenge there. And challenge is rather a meek, minor kind of a way of talking about it because it's not just a bit of a challenge, it's the challenge of reality itself. So it is the existential risk that I was talking about a few episodes back. It is this great, great risk of stepping out of the comfort of our ideas and our routines, our habits, and seeing what happens when we do step out of them. Our normal way of being is to surround ourselves with a world that is known. And we do this without generally reflecting on the fact that this is what we are doing. I mean, I don't go around the place thinking, I'm living in the known world. I can name everything in it. I know everything in it. This is so taken for granted. I don't think anything of it. I live in the known world, and I don't even think there is such a thing as living in the known world. I just think that's all there is to life. And yet if we were to dwell on it a little bit, we'd realize that everything we see fails to surprise us in the way that life should surprise us. Because essentially because we're relating to our mental categories of things rather than the things themselves. So there's a very hasty recognition, and then we skip on to the next thing to recognize. And there's no such thing as this utter fascination which doesn't give way to boredom because we know what it is that we're looking at. So this is it's the same kind of thing that Alan Watts was saying when he was saying that really a philosopher should be a professional village idiot, not some type of super intellectual sophisticated guy or woman, but a village idiot who goes around gawping at everything, because that gawping is the relating to everything in the way that you're actually seeing the world and being utterly surprised by it, rather than being sophisticated and never being taken by surprise. So the world that we make with our thoughts, the mind-created virtual reality, or the known world, or the positive reality, is dull. There's no two ways to put it, it's pure dull. So just like it's said sometimes that when you grow up and become a grown-up, that's a very dull business, awesomely, infinitely tedious, the same way the known world is dull, frighteningly dull. But it comes with an advantage that we don't pay any heed to, but the advantage is it allows us to construct the concrete identity, which can only exist within the known realm. So everything that I know reinforces the idea of me as the knower, because I know it. So everything's confirmation. It's like someone's following me around, and every time I say something, he says, "Ah, yes, you're right there. You're right there, boy. You're right there. Ah, you're totally right there." I'm being confirmed by the world that I see because it's confirming my way of looking at things, which isn't the only way of looking at things, but because it's always being confirmed, I never look any further, and I think it is the only way of looking at things. So to get back on track with regard to this issue of the existential challenge and the idea of psychological work, when we're in the known world, there's no challenge at all. There's no effortfulness involved in being in it. There's no effort because the known world tells us who we are, and it tells us what to do, and it tells us everything about it. We just go through the motions. We're totally manipulated by it, totally controlled by it. We're a puppet within it. And this state, being a puppet, is not effortful. We've been controlled by the thinking mind. If we start to get interested in the world that isn't the regular old generic world that's created by the thinking mind, this is a challenge because it doesn't confirm the concrete identity. In other words, we feel kind of weird and unsure of ourselves and existentially challenged. It's like, I used to be really, really sure of myself or my assumptions about the world, or my feeling of being in control in the world, my perceived self-efficacy. And now all that's starting to go wobbly and quivery like a mound of jelly. Just like, this is feeling all very weird. And that, to stay with that feeling, is effortful, not in a straining sense, because when straining always means we're trying to attain an outcome, a goal. We know what it is and we just want to get it. So when we're out of our comfort bubble, we are working, but we're not working to attain a known outcome. Because if we were, we'd just be heading straight back into the comfort bubble, because that's what the comfort bubble is. It's a load of known outcomes. So as soon as I start straining, I'm no longer out there. I'm no longer doing psychological work. So there is this differentiation that we need to make between trying to be somewhere in particular, which is not where I am now, and being where I am now, which I can't really say anything particular about or say what it is. And so theatrical escaping is trying to get into a known situation, and it is unconscious suffering. And so is theatrical attaining, where I don't perceive myself to be running away from anything, but I perceive myself to be trying to grab hold of something good in the outside world, as if there is as if my well-being or happiness can be obtained by grabbing hold of something in the outside world. So not doing, which is, as I was saying, is not something that we do on purpose in relation to any kind of a goal. It's how we stay in the groundless uncertainty of the present moment, where the concrete self is not being confirmed. Now it equates to staying in the pain, as I was saying in the last episode, but we can see now that it's more than staying with the pain. It's a lot more than that. It's actually staying with reality. And as I get better at not running away from the pain, I'm also getting better at not running away from reality. And so this isn't just a small thing of sticking with the pain, it's actually a much, much bigger thing, because out of conscious suffering comes the possibility of actually being alive, really, feeling peace of mind, genuine peace of mind, and experiencing freedom. So even though I'm sticking with the pain, that isn't actually pain. In the end, it turns out that what I'm sticking with isn't the pain. It's actually just life. So I've learned something really, really good. When I wasn't really looking to learn that, probably I was just looking for a way to survive the pain without tormenting myself or sabotaging myself or making it worse for myself. Okay, thanks for watching.